the Valley's greatest hits, the greatest hits of all time. Rod Wolf's Sunday Night Hall of Fame, Oldies 99.9.
It's time for the Bobby Fuller story in words and music on the Hall of Fame show. Bobby Fuller was born October 22, 1942 in Goose Creek, Texas, to parents Lawson and Lorraine Fuller. Already at home were a 12-year-old half-brother, Jack LaFleur, and nearly 3-year-old brother, Randy. Shortly after his birth, the Fuller family packed their belongings and left Goose Creek for Salt Lake City, Utah, where they remained until Bobby was 14 years old. While living in Salt Lake, both Bobby and brother Randy were already messing around with music, playing the drums, piano, trumpet, trombone, and of course the instrument most teens in the middle 1950s loved, the guitar. However, older brother Jack seemed to be the bad seed, running away from home on numerous occasions and already involved in petty theft and hanging out with the less desirable citizens of Salt Lake. In 1956, Lawson Fuller was offered a better job in the refineries of El Paso, Texas, so the family packed up again and moved back to the Lone Star State. Back in Texas, 14-year-old Bobby continued to work on his music, while the family feared that Randy was on the same path as Jack, so they sent Randy off to military school to try and steer him back onto the right path of society. Not long after, Jack's bruised and battered body was found, and the coroner's report listed the cause of death as murder. Although not close to brother Jack, it is reported that the death at the age of 26 seemed to make Bobby even more determined to concentrate on music as his way of life. Bobby apparently felt that life was too short, and therefore it was absolutely necessary to follow your dreams. By this time, Bobby was also now infatuated with the work of another native Texan, Lubbock-born and raised Buddy Holly. Already attracting attention around El Paso for his skills on the drums, Bobby started to hone his songwriting skills too. He struck up a partnership with a lyricist named Mary Stone, who also happened to be the mother of one of his high school friends. Her more mature influence can be heard on some of the songs Bobby and Mary co-wrote, like You're in Love, You Kiss Me, Only for You, and To Make Love Last. By the time Randy Fuller came back to El Paso from military school, he was astounded by the progress his little brother Bobby had made in the quest to be a recording star. In fact, Bobby had borrowed Randy's old lead guitar and was now considered prolific enough to step out from behind the drums and lead a group. When Randy suggested that he would like to get involved in the music, Bobby suggested he learn to play the bass. In the fall of 1961, Bobby converted his parents' living room into an impromptu recording studio, and with the help of brother Randy and some El Paso musician friends, recorded 2 songs, including the Holly-influenced You're in Love, one of the songs co-written by Mary Stone. The end result was good enough to be released by the independent Yucca Records. Receiving El Paso radio airplay, the song peaked at number 2 in the market and sold over 3,000 copies.
When you feel that old thrill up your spine like a chill and the clock's standing still, you're in love. And when bells seem to ring and you dream like everything, heartstring goes sings it, you're in love. When you think with your heart instead of thinking with your head, and without a certain one you think you'd rather be dead. Play it calm, play it cool, now you're in a different school. You're way up but you're no fool, you're in love.
After the attention of his first regional hit record, Bobby Fuller decided it was time to form his own group, and also time for him to visit the recording studio and producer of his idol, Buddy Holly. So it was off to Clovis, New Mexico for a studio session with Norman Petty. The resulting single release, Gently My Love, sold even more copies than his first release. But Bobby wasn't happy with the sound and decided to just set up a permanent recording studio in his parents' house. Like Buddy Holly, Bobby Fuller was seemingly always in a hurry to do things, like he wasn't going to have a lot of time. The next single was on Bobby's own Eastwood record label. By now, Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics was El Paso's biggest regional rock band, drawing crowds wherever they played. But never satisfied with the speed of his career's involvement, he quickly came to realize that his hometown would not be the proper venue required to further expose his music to a nationwide audience. So in 1964, Bobby booked his band for some shows in California. Not only was he hoping the group's wildly successful live sound would be noticed by record industry executives, he also fully intended to take all his tapes and records with him to play for any record company willing to listen. While on the West Coast, the only real encouragement he received was from Los Angeles-based Bob Keane, the owner of Delphi Records. Bob had a reputation, both good and bad, for handling acts as diversified as early Sam Cooke to the teenage actor Johnny Crawford, who played son Mark to Chuck Connor's Luke McCain on TV's popular Western, The Rifleman. But perhaps Bob Keane was most famous for discovering another star-crossed artist, Ritchie Valens. It was Bob who first signed Ritchie to his brand new Delphi label and was the only person to professionally record Ritchie prior to his death with the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly. In 1964, Bob Keane listened to Bobby Fuller's records and tapes and told him he was interested, but that Bobby should go home to El Paso to record a little bit more and then come back and see him. In 1960, an album called In Style with the Crickets had been released. After Buddy's death, one of his original musical partners, Sonny Curtis, had returned to the group. It was now Sonny who had taken over the majority of the songwriting for the Crickets. A couple of the songs on that album caught Bobby Fuller's attention and would later be synonymous with him rather than Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
Well, breaking rocks in the hot sun, I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won. I miss my baby and a good fun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won. I left my baby and I feel so bad. Yes, my race is run. She's the best girl that I've ever had. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won.
Rod Wolf's Sunday Night Hall of Fame.
The Crickets with their version of I Fought the Law and Love's Made a Fool of You from 1960. Bobby Fuller's home studio recorded version of I Fought the Law became the biggest selling single yet in the Southwest, cementing the group's reputation as the missing link to Buddy Holly. Bobby soon called a meeting of the group and announced that, in his opinion, they had gone as far as they could in El Paso and that he was relocating to Hollywood. Only drummer Dalton Powell decided to stay at home, and he was replaced by Dwayne Quirico. By December of 1964, Bobby was once again meeting with Bob Keane at Delphi Records. This time the group was signed and rushed into the studio to record. At the same time, needing a venue to showcase their incredible live show, the band auditioned at the club called the Balboa Rendezvous in Newport Beach, California. The Rendezvous, as it was commonly known, had been the home for surf groups over the years like Dick Dale and the Deltones, as well as the Chantays, who had recorded the hit song Pipeline. The first single release for Bob Keane by Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics was in mid-December of 1964, and it appeared on the Delphi subsidiary, Donna Records. The first side of the record was called Those Memories of You. Although listed as the A side of the record, Bobby Fuller and the group was not happy with the song or the sound of Those Memories of You. It had been written by one of Bob Keane's friends, Jim Pewter. The boys from El Paso instead hoped that the B side of the record, an instrumental that Bobby Fuller had written and that they had played many times in their hometown, would catch the ears of the nation's disc jockeys. Neither Those Memories of You or the instrumental side of the record, Favorite Martian, made any impact anywhere except, of course, back home in El Paso. With 1965 came a new label subsidiary of Delphi called Mustang, and that new label was created by Bob Keane specifically to promote Bobby Fuller. Also at this same time, the ABC television network was working on a brand new teenage weekly rock show that would feature the greatest past, present, and future stars performing their hits to a live studio audience. That show was called Shindig.
From ABC Television Center in Hollywood, Shindig. And now here is your Shindig host, Jimmy O'Neill.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Howdy, hi, Shindiggers, and welcome into another rock and roll and thrill and throbbing Thursday night Shindig.
Bob Keane, ever the promoter, had an idea. He decided to push Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics to be the house band on the TV show. With that in mind, the next single on the Donna label did not list Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics as the artist, but this time it said the Shindigs. Both sides of the single were instrumentals, with the A side called Wolfman, a tribute to the already legendary Southern California disc jockey, Wolfman Jack.
All right, this is the Wolfman speaking, chillin'. We're gonna rock out to the music. Here we go.
The B-side of the release by the Shindigs was called Thunder Reef. Not only did the record sync without a trace, so did Bob Keane's efforts to get ABC to hire the group as the house band for the show. By this time, the Delphi studios were going through some construction changes, and the band drove to Phoenix to record their third single for Bob Keane. This time, Bobby Fuller produced the session, and a song he wrote called She's My Girl would be released in February of 1965 as Mustang Records 3004. And also at this time, Bob Keane decided it was once again time for a group name change.
She's my girl, she's my girl, she's my girl. Maybe she is just 16, may never be a moving queen, but still she is all that I dreamed about. We talked for hours
the very first record release for the Bobby Fuller 4. 3 single releases for the Delphi family of labels, but none of them successful, except back home in El Paso. But all of that was about to change for the Bobby Fuller 4. This is Rod Wolf, and you're listening to the Sunday Night Hall of Fame. We'll continue the Bobby Fuller story in words and music after this brief intermission on Oldies 99.9.
Rod Wolf's Sunday Night Hall of Fame, the Valley's greatest hits of all time. Oldies 99.9.